UNDP's daily business, the business of many of our organizations, is to help governments make intelligent choices on behalf of their countries, regulate markets, incentivize markets. So when we look at something like renewable energy, I mean, we have all lived in just a decade and a half from a global economy that laughed at the idea that major industrialized economies would produce 10, 20, 30, never mind 40, 50% of their electricity with renewables. It's already happening. The $300+ billion investment market is an example of how an entire system, the energy investment market system, has been turned on its head. I learned just last week that HSBC, as one of the banks that is now moving into this SDG financing era, launched an SDG bond for $1 billion, and it was 3 times oversubscribed. And it's going to be the same as with green bonds. They're now well over $150 billion, but the first 6-7 years was almost a flat curve, and then it went vertical. The SDGs are 2 or 3 years away from leveraging literally hundreds of billions of dollars. My point here is, yes, the GEF play an important catalytic role, as long as we bear in mind that we're dealing with systems that require not just a sort of free array of players coming together. If we want to meet the timelines and the scale on which we need to transform our economies, regulation, public policy, public consensus are fundamental, because markets are inherently conservative. They are not going to be the risk takers if we do not give them the signals. And Paul, I think you spoke to the Paris Agreement. Maybe its most fundamental legacy will be that it changed the signal to the world from one where carbon intensity was still the way forward to it's going to be a low carbon future. Then everything else follows from that. And the last word on what I have now begun to put a lot of energy into with UNDP, trying to understand in that notion of markets and supply chains, first of all, data. I think it's one of the great areas we are working together, learning together. We are living in a digital age where so much more is possible, right down to the consumer having instant access to information, traceability. But if you want to affect markets and investments, I think the validation of impact becomes critical. Whether it's social impact investment or it's simply markets that want to carry certain risks or not, our ability to inform these kinds of investment markets of the future with a validation of impact and the way we can do that with indices, with data, but also with the legitimacy of institutions, I think could play an enormous role in turning the trickle of finance into literally a flood, and that within 10 years.